Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the George W. Norris Legislative Chamber for the 65th day of the 108th Legislature First Session. Our chaplain today is from Senator Holcroft's district. He is Jason Samuel, Crossover Church, Bennington. Please rise.
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for today. Thank you for giving us this beautiful day for us, that we can walk in the calling that you have for each one of us, O God. Thank you, God, for this huge privilege that you've given me. I had never in my wildest dream I thought that I'll be able to do this, leading a prayer session in Nebraska Legislature, growing up in India, God. Thank you for the divine provision that you make way for us, O God. God, I pray that your presence will be so real in each one of our lives. I pray that you will just continue to anoint each of the servant leaders who are here, God, representing all of Nebraska's citizens from north, south, east, west of the state, God. I pray that, God, as they serve you with that passion that they have, I pray that you will combine that passion with compassion and overall build that each one of them with your wisdom, O God, so that they can make the right decisions. They can make the right choices as they are going over each of the legislative sessions, O God. I pray that you just be with each one of them, strengthen them, cover them under your grace, O God. Give them the energy and the tenacities to serve your people in this state. I pray for each of the branch of government of Nebraska. Pray that you will be over every one of them, oh God, the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary, God. I pray for your presence here. Thank you again that you are with us, oh God. And in Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Senator Brewer for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I call to order the 65th day of the 108th Legislature First Session. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please record.
There's a quorum present, Mr. President.
Are there any corrections for the journal?
There are no corrections this morning.
Are there any messages, reports, or announcements?
There are, Mr. President. Bills read yesterday were presented to the governor this morning at 8:14. That's all I have this time, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Bozen would like to recognize the physician of the day, Dr. George Voigtlander of Lincoln. Please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature. While the legislature is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose to sign and do hereby sign legislative resolutions 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, and 93. Mr. Clerk, for items. Its final reading, all members in your seat. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, final reading, Gross Legislative Bill 77. I have a priority motion from Senator Raybold. She would move to recommit Legislative Bill 77 to committee.
Senator Raybold, you're recognized on your committee. Amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, fellow Nebraskans watching this debate on this important measure this morning. I stand in full support of recommit to committee. This bill is not ready. I'll spend some time this morning, and I know my other colleagues will do the same, showing why it is a mistake and how you have all been misled on what LB 77 actually does. We are a nation held in the grips of senseless gun violence. This stops today when we vote this lawless concealed carry down, not our state, not our children, not our officers. Please stand with me and other law-abiding, responsible gun owners for common sense gun safety. Please, please vote no on LB 77. Facts matter. Keeping our children and law enforcement safe matters, and local control matters as well as the extremely high price we are paying for giving up our local authority if we approve this bill. We have so much at stake on this vote. Children, families, law enforcement, and communities will be at greater risk if we pass this bill. They are relying on each and every one of you here today, my colleagues, and your vote as legislators to keep them safer and protect their right to life and liberty that are enshrined in our Nebraska Constitution. We have become one nation under guns, and that is not an American value nor even a moral value. Facts matter. Tragically, more lives are lost this year to gun violence than last year. Recently added states with more right-to-carry laws have increased rates of violent crimes and gun violence and road rage incidents. States with tighter gun control laws have fewer gun-related deaths. Even Illinois has a lower record of gun deaths per 100,000, despite the horrific things going on in Chicago. And please, colleagues, do not use a misinformed argument that the U.S. has more mental health issues than any other country. We don't. We do not. We simply have more guns than any other country on this planet. Study after study shows more lax gun laws result in more gun violence, like our neighboring states of Missouri and Kansas. And on your desks, you should have another CDC handout that shows the ranking. Our state of Nebraska is ranked number 10. We are in the top 10 with the lowest incidence of gun deaths per 100,000. Why are we passing this LB 77? This harms individuals. Countless studies have proven that there is a link between right to carry and increased rates of violent crimes and gun violence. Just one study that shows this connection is research published by Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in September of 2022 that showed the average rate of assaults with firearms increased an average of 9.5%. Did everyone hear that? Gun violence increased 9.5% relative to forecasted trends in the first 10 years after 34 states relaxed restrictions on civilians carrying concealed firearms in public. Every round of debate we have had, you have denied, distorted, and dismantled the truth. However, I did actually appreciate your efforts at even discrediting Fox News reporting of May of 2022 that gun violence is now the #1 cause of death for U.S. children. Gun violence is the #1 cause of death in U.S. children. Every single major news network, every single major publication in the United States has stated that. And yet, you seem to ignore that. I have to tell you, in my 12 years of government service, I have never been in a chamber where people have distorted facts so much. As a business owner, I just don't have that luxury of doing things like that. And when I listen to things, I have to go to a safe place and I get grounded by quotes. Aldous Huxley said, "Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored." Daniel Patrick Moynihan actually gets credit for this quote. "Everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts." Or Daniel Patrick, or another good one is by James Lowen. "Every man has a right to his own opinion, but no man has a right to be wrong in his facts." No more thoughts, no more prayers, no more lip service. If you have ever had a question about what you could and should do to help, if you are a parent, a grandparent, now is the time. Now is the time to act. Vote no on cloture. Vote no on more guns. Vote no on lax laws that put your families at risk. Vote no. I gave you another handout that talks about LB 77 and what you were sold. LB 77 is very clear in its intent to prohibit certain regulations of weapons by cities, villages, and counties. It is not just concealed carry handguns that this bill is going after. It is all firearms. Please look at the handout that has the two columns, and it has a side-by-side comparison of what the current law is and what happens if LB 77 is passed. Currently, the state of Nebraska expressly grants limited authorities to local jurisdictions to regulate firearms. This bill takes that away. As someone who has been honored to serve my county and my city, this bill is a big deal that impacts all cities on their rights to regulate, punish, and prevent the discharge of firearms. This should be a big, huge deal to all cities in our state. Omaha is the city of the metropolitan class, and Lincoln is the city of the primary class. We have different issues of safety versus what the rural communities face. Losing our local authority and losing local control is just plain wrong. Let's be clear, it is not just our cities, it's Grand Island, it's Hastings, it's Scottsbluff, it's Chadron, and Albion, and more. However, there is another goal that has been prevalent in every single legislative body across the United States of gun lobbyists to pack state legislators with conservative gun rights politicians that take away the city's ability to do what is in their own best interests. You have heard from law enforcement and the chiefs of police on how insistent they are to keep concealed carry permit in place for the protection of their officers and communities, and how important it is to kill this bill. It was pointed out to Senator Brewer that there are substantive changes to the time, place, and manner requirements, such as 1, changes to the definition of concealed that will confuse our attorneys. 2, changes to whether a city can ban weapons on its buses, changes to whether and if which weapons a city may ban from its place and premises. You were sent a very detailed summary that points out some of these substantive changes, and that is why this bill needs to be sent back to committee. We cannot put the lives of our children, families, and law enforcement at risk until we get this bill right. And Senator Brewer wasn't open to making these important changes and wouldn't consider sending it back to committee for the much needed amendments and revisions. Thank you, Mr. President. I was so concerned that I wrote a letter to the Attorney General, and I asked him clearly, and I have not heard from our Attorney General, please address these issues. If LB 77 is passed, would a city or other political subdivision have the ability to prohibit concealed handguns on publicly controlled or jointly owned property? Would a city or other political subdivision have the ability to prohibit other concealed weapons or firearms on publicly controlled or jointly owned property? Would a city or other political subdivision have the ability to prohibit openly carried weapons or firearms on publicly controlled or jointly owned property? Lastly, would a city or other public subdivision have the ability to prohibit concealed handguns or weapons on public transportation? This bill is not ready for us to pass or approve. There is way too much at stake. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Raybold. Senator John Kavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I rise in support of the motion to recommit and opposed to the bill. And we had, I think, 8 hours of debate on general, 4 hours on select. And we've debated similar bills in the past, so I don't think it's any surprise to anybody what my feelings are about this bill and this subject. And I see the queue's pretty full. We only got about 2 hours. So I'm just going to try and focus on the one biggest point to me, one of my biggest concerns with this bill, which is the fear that unintendedly this bill creates a lesser penalty for individuals who are prohibited persons. And so we've made a policy decision to prohibit certain individuals from possessing firearms in this state, and I think most states have done something like this. And it is described under 28-1206, possession of a deadly weapon by a prohibited person and penalty. And it goes through and lists off some of the people who are prohibited persons, including persons who've previously been convicted of a felony, people who are fugitive from justice, so somebody who's on the run, or somebody who is violating a valid domestic violence or sexual assault protection order. So all of those things, there's a few others as well, are people who we have previously determined should not possess a firearm. And the data backs up why we've made that decision. If a person is convicted of possessing a firearm and meets one of those criteria, so say previously convicted of a felony or violating a domestic violence protection order, the penalty for that under current statute is a 1D felony, which is a 3 to 50, minimum 3 years, maximum 50 years. Under this bill, it creates a section, which I believe is section 8 of the final reading copy, and it amends 28-1202 to include a minor or a prohibited person shall not carry a weapon or weapons concealed on or about his or her person, such as a handgun, knife, brass knuckles, iron, or other deadly weapons. A violation of this section is a Class 1 misdemeanor for the first offense and a Class 4 felony for the second offense, second and subsequent offenses. What that means is if somebody meets that definition of the prohibited person in this section and they have a weapon concealed upon their person, that offense could be construed to be a Class 1 misdemeanor. So a decrease, a Class 1 misdemeanor is a offense for which you can do up to a year in county jail. So not even going to prison. That is a pretty substantial decrease in the penalty for the same conduct. The distinction in the conduct is that under 28-1206, the conduct is the person is a prohibited person, so previously convicted of felony, violating a domestic violence protection order, and they have a gun. The conduct under 28-1202 would be previously convicted of a felony or violating a domestic violence protection order, but they have the gun in their pocket or under their coat, as has been described before. And so essentially, my concern, and one of the reasons I support the recommit, is I'm concerned that this bill inadvertently will create a climate where criminals are incentivized to conceal a gun upon their person because the penalty is so much less than if they just have a gun on them overall. And so that is why I think I have suggested originally when we were debating this bill that this particular section should be taken back for
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Additional hearing. Why I continue to support the motion to recommit here. There are other problems, as Senator Raybold has articulated. I think other folks will articulate some of their concerns as well. But it's just as we get to this final stage, and I appreciate everybody sitting here quietly and listening. I feel heard. But that is a serious issue with how this bill could be implemented in our court system. So I would just encourage you in the next 2 hours, take a look at the bill, take a look at that, and listen to the other parts. But I will be supporting the recommit, and I'll be opposing the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Day, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I rise in opposition to LB 77 and in support of the motion to recommit. I just wanted to read a few things from one of the handouts that Senator Raybould had passed out yesterday evening, I believe, onto our desks, and she has this here discussing pre-LB 77 and then if LB 77 passes, which first I want to note, just for anyone watching at home, the incredible leadership that Senator Raybould has demonstrated on this bill and her relentless, tireless efforts on working to stop this bill from passing have been extremely admirable. So down at the bottom on the left-hand side, it says supposedly LB 77 was supposed to remove the permit requirement to conceal carry a handgun, and that was repeatedly represented as the only intent or impact of this bill. If LB 77 passes, the statute regulating concealed weapons will read in its entirety, a minor or a prohibited person shall not carry a weapon or weapons concealed on or about his or her person, such as a handgun, a knife, brass or iron knuckles, or any other deadly weapon. A violation of this section is a Class 1 misdemeanor for a first offense and a Class 4 felony for a second or subsequent offense. That means only minors under 21 years of age and those meeting the prohibited person criteria generally in 28-1206 and federal law are banned from carrying concealed weapons. Everyone else can carry a concealed weapon, handgun, assault rifle, knife, etc. Consider that means that a 22-year-old with 6 misdemeanor non-domestic assaults can carry a weapon concealed. That means that an 89-year-old with dementia can carry a weapon concealed. That means that any drunk adult can carry any weapon other than a handgun concealed. That means a person who is just put into emergency protective custody due to an officer believing they are mentally ill and dangerous can agree to voluntary treatment and immediately carry a weapon concealed because they were not involuntarily committed. They are not a prohibited person. That means, under some courts' interpretations of Bruin, that a person being tried for a violent felony crime but not yet convicted can carry any weapon concealed. Is this result consistent with what you understand, or excuse me, with what you understood when you were told that all LB 77 does is say that if you can lawfully hold a handgun in your hand without a permit, you should be able to put it inside your coat without a permit. Weapons I can now conceal if LB 77 passes. As an adult who is not an otherwise prohibited person are a handgun with some restrictions, an AK-47 with no restrictions, a dagger with no restrictions, short rifle with no restrictions, grenade with no restrictions, taser with no restrictions, brass knuckles with no restrictions. Additionally, there is no language in LB 77 to expressly allow a city or municipality to prohibit the above weapons from being carried, concealed, or open in a city, building, bus, or park. Are you comfortable with this result? Additionally, for me, continuing to come back to this bill and this type of legislation, relaxing gun laws, always makes me think of my kids. I have 2 kids in public schools, and for me, whenever I see the news and I see
1 minute.
Most recently, you saw the picture of the little girl in, I think it was Nashville, I could be wrong, in the bus with her hands up against the glass, crying, looking out of the window. I see the faces of my kids and those kids. And I just don't understand how those of you who have children or grandchildren in schools, going to grocery stores, these things happen everywhere in the United States, how you could vote green on this bill and not understand how it is going to directly impact the lives of the families and the children in the state of Nebraska. We know this is a uniquely American problem. It has nothing to do with mental behavioral health care. It has nothing to do with video games. Those things exist in every other country on this planet. I will yield the rest of my time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Day. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield my time to Senator Raybould if she desires.
Senator Raybould, that's 4 minutes, 55 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Conrad. You know, we had a wonderful Lincoln City attorney in her off time as a busy mom, spent hours compiling and looking at the legal ramifications of this. And, you know, she shared them with Senator Brewer, and these are her comments. I want to let you know that Senator Brewer was extremely gracious and generous with his time and allowed me to meet with him on Friday, March 31st to express my concerns, foremost as a mom, but also informed by my education and experience. I left that meeting extremely impressed with his willingness to meet and the very respectful attention he paid as I spoke. I also left that meeting feeling more concerned by the language of the bill, because when the attorney who was with Senator Brewer spoke about some of my concerns, rather than tell me I was reading it wrong, seemed to ratify my reading in many respects. So I somewhat hesitate to send this letter to you all, and she sent this letter to each and every one of my colleagues here, because I do not want to in any way disrespect Senator Brewer, but I cannot sit quietly simply because it is on final reading and time is short. I remain willing and wanting to stay in touch with Senator Brewer to find language that gets him what he wants and needs for a successful permitless carry of a concealed handgun, while still getting what I need to feel safe in my work environment and to know I can interpret and apply the law, and to know I can send my kids out with reasonable laws relating to handguns and other weapons. And I'm thankful to Senator Day because she read the essential components talking about what we were told about LB 77. We were told it's just as simple that you don't have to pay the fee, you don't need to do the background check, and you don't need the training. We just want you to be able to, when you have your gun and you put on your coat, you're not going to be fined for that. But this is what the attorney said. When you voted to advance LB 77, what did you think the addition of the words by another person would mean in practice? The protections under sections such as 69-2440 says, whenever a permit holder who is carrying a concealed handgun is contacted by a peace officer or by emergency services personnel, the permit holder shall immediately inform the peace officer or emergency services personnel that I, the permit holder, I'm carrying a concealed handgun, are relevant only now when the handgun is concealed. When you voted to advance LB 77, did you know you had changed what it means to be concealed? Did you know the rules were indeed changing for when a person had to reveal the presence of a handgun to a peace officer? They were changed because the predicate definition of concealed is changed. And it is only when a handgun is concealed that those protections come into play. Of note, there is no mention of a concealed weapon other than the handgun needing to be disclosed. Keep in mind, you could be carrying an AK-47, you could be carrying brass knuckles, you could be carrying and hiding a long gun. I'm not sure how you would do it, but you would not need to disclose that to the peace officer. She went on to say that, keep in mind, on page 15, lines 22 to 26 of LB 77, you make it so only persons under 21 years of age and prohibited persons are banned from carrying concealed weapons, apparently of all types. Thank you, Mr. President. She says, seems odd, seems dangerous. And if you realized you were allowing 26-year-olds to conceal carry every weapon, including, as I read it, long guns and daggers, unless they are a prohibited person, not just a handgun, why should they only have to reveal it to a law enforcement official if it is a handgun? That is why this bill needs to go back to committee. There are so many unintended consequences that all of us are willing to help Senator Brewer with. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Raybold. Senator Frederickson, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraska. I continue to have serious concerns about LB 77. And I spoke about this previously when I've spoken on the mic about this bill when it was on select as well as on general. One thing that I have, and I've had a lot of conversations with different colleagues about this policy. And I think, again, this is, with everything we do in here, the nuance of making statewide policy is complicated. And, I can speak for the district that I represent, but after having conversations and hearing different stories from colleagues from other parts of the state, is it possible that LB 77 makes sense in more rural parts of the state? Sure. I'm not sure I can say it doesn't make sense there. What I do feel pretty strongly about is that this does not make sense in Omaha. And it does not make sense in the urban parts of our state. It just doesn't. And I think we can all acknowledge, if we are looking at what's happening throughout our country, that we truly are in a gun violence crisis. Just this week, a Walgreens employee shot a pregnant woman that he thought was shoplifting. This happened in Tennessee. There's a news article from CBS News about this, and I was reading this morning, and it was particularly concerning to me. It says, a woman who was 7 months pregnant was shot by a Walgreens employee in Nashville, Tennessee this week after he suspected she had stolen cosmetics from the store's pharmacy. Now, she and her newborn baby remain hospitalized and after undergoing an emergency C-section. A Walgreens team leader shot 24-year-old Miss Ferguson in the store's parking lot on Wednesday evening after he followed her out of the store when he was tipped off to the alleged shoplifting. And this is a part that is concerning to me. So Mr. Boyd, who is the employee who shot Miss Ferguson, Mr. Boyd claims he fired his semi-automatic in self-defense because he was, quote, in fear. He didn't know if Ferguson and another woman she was with were armed. And I bring that up specifically because one argument that I've heard is that if you don't know if other folks are armed, that might decrease crime because people might assume that other folks are armed and that would deter them from engaging in criminal behavior. But that's just not how human psychology works. We can see from this story that this individual became a bit trigger happy. He shot a pregnant woman because he was fearful that she might be armed. When no one knows who is carrying a weapon, that's what we create here. We create a culture and a society of fear. And we also create more pressure on our already overstressed law enforcement officers. If law enforcement officers are thank you, Mr. President, are not clear whether or not folks are armed or not, we're putting them in very precarious situations. So, as I said earlier, I appreciate the nuance of the diversity of our state, and it is possible that this might make sense in more rural parts of our state, but it does not make sense for Omaha. So I will continue to oppose this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Frederickson. Senator Dungan, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. I rise today, again, opposed to LB 77 and in favor of the motion to recommit to committee. I think that we've obviously had a number of discussions about this before, and I'm listening intently to a number of the points that are being made, but I wanted to sort of talk about, again, some of the concerns that I had with regards to LB 77. When this was on general file and select file, I expressed some concerns about the writing of this piece of legislation. And I had talked with Senator Brewer about that, and I'll probably be asking him a couple questions here in just a moment, which I did talk to him about ahead of time. But the questions that I have primarily rest on what is and what isn't allowable for a city to prohibit in buildings they own. So obviously, I think Senator Frederickson hit the nail on the head here that the state of Nebraska has a wide array of needs. And what makes sense maybe in rural Nebraska is slightly different than other places, but I live in Lincoln. And I've had an opportunity to speak with individuals who work with the city and for the city. And there's been a concern, a number of concerns that have been expressed about the way that LB 77 is written. I think that when you just look at this compared to what is the current state of the law, there's a concern that, as Senator Raybould pointed out, courts, for example, a court building, would no longer be able to prohibit somebody carrying a weapon into that court. Under the current city law, the city of Lincoln does have a statute or a code that says that you cannot carry a weapon, essentially, concealed or otherwise, into a building that's owned by the city or the county, with certain exceptions. So when you go check in at the courthouse, there's sheriffs that stand at the front door, and you go through a metal detector, and you're not allowed to carry, for example, a gun or a machete, which is a thing we actually see a lot. Blades, knives, brass knuckles, things like that. You're not allowed to carry that into the courtroom. But my concern is the way that this is currently written. In the section on page 17 that allows the prohibition of carrying certain things into police stations, courthouses, it only references a concealed handgun. A concealed handgun is the language that's used, not weapon, not firearm, and not open carry. And so again, my concern becomes, if this is adopted, individual municipalities, cities, villages, whatever it is, are going to lose that local control that they have to be able to make the best decisions for their area. And so the concern then is, let's say you walk into the courthouse. Would you be able to walk in with an AR-15? Would you be able to walk in with a blade that's 7 inches long? Would you be able to walk in with a handgun, but it's not concealed? And that's just a question that I had. And so I was wondering if Senator Brewer would yield to a couple of questions here just to clarify a few things on the record. Senator Brewer, would you yield to some questions?
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. And we talked about this last time and also off the mic, but I just wanted to clarify. Is it the intention of LB 77 to further restrict what cities or individual places could do with regards to the banning of weapons on their premises? So like carrying an open carrying a firearm, for example, into a courthouse. What's the intention of LB 77 as it interacts with those local laws?
The intent was that the rules as they are, with where the restrictions say to Pinnacle Bank Arena, those are posted and they would continue to be restricted there. It is the city's ability to restrict that. On the courthouse issue, keep in mind that was only added for the judges and no one else. So it was never the intent that be the general public that would be allowed. The procedures to enter that courtroom area is still, the metal detector and the search that goes on there. So there was never an intent to change any of that. It was simply that judges could be armed.
Okay, and then one other question I had that I just wanted to clarify here on final reading. You remember the discussion we had with regards to public transportation. Do you believe that currently a city could restrict the carrying of weapons on, say, StarTran here in Lincoln on the buses? Does that count as a place and premises under the law?
It is owned by the city. The issue would be that there was a placard placed in a visible point of entry so that people are aware of it when they make that entry.
Okay, thank you, Senator Brewer. I appreciate that. And those are just points that I wanted to make sure we clarified here. I think there's still concerns I have about the writing. There's still concerns I have about some of the parts of this law. But at the end of the day, I do appreciate this discussion, and I remain at this point opposed to LB 77. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Dungan. Senator Jacobson, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Senator Brewer, it's been 7 years. 7 years. This has been your priority bill. Had a lot of discussion about this. I'm amazed, truly amazed at all of the new, unique nuances that come up every year. If we could just send it back to committee and spend one more year thinking about it, it'll fix everything. Let's forget about people's constitutional rights. Let's hold it off for another year so we can study it a little more. I said before on the mic on Select, and I'll say it again, we have a significant drug problem in this country led by fentanyl. We have laws that I recall, I think there's laws out there that say you can't possess illegal drugs. How well has that worked? When we pass laws and they're broken, who are the people that are breaking the laws? Criminals, right? So do we think that we can pass another law or prevent people from having their constitutional right to conceal carry because by doing that, we're going to restrict the law-abiding citizens from having their constitutional right? But guess what? The criminals don't care. Does anyone really believe that the criminals aren't going to do what they're doing today, regardless of what the laws are? I can tell you as a rural senator, we get out into areas where you're out in the wide open spaces. Having the ability to carry a firearm, having the ability to lock that in your console, lock it in your glove box is important. That should not be restricted. 7 years. 7 years, 8 hours of debate on general, 4 hours of debate on select. Here we are again. It's time to move this bill forward. It's time to give the citizens of Nebraska the ability to exercise their constitutional rights. It's time for us to allow law-abiding citizens over the age of 21 who have gone through all of the requirements for an open carry permit to be able to conceal that gun as well. Again, that's what this bill is doing. And in fact, we will be protecting kids because we're going to allow citizens to protect themselves. When we hear about these horrific shootings, where's that happening at? It's happening in soft targets where we've banned anyone from carrying a gun. So the law-abiding citizens, they don't have an ability to shoot back. In fact, they don't even have to shoot back because if the criminals knew that there was somebody who could shoot back, they're probably not coming there to begin with. If anybody thinks you're going to go eliminate guns in this country, it's just not going to happen any more than we're going to eliminate drugs. This is about exercising constitutional rights. Mr. President, how much time do I have left?
1 minute, 30 seconds.
Senator Brewer, I'll yield the remainder of my time to you. Thank you.
Senator Brewer, you're recognized. 1 minute, 20 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Jacobson. With just this time left, what I'm going to do, and if you guys get tired of hearing it, I really don't care because it's the Constitution you swore an oath to, and for some reason, you're strategically remembering what you want, when you want, and not the entire thing. This is the Nebraska Constitution. Article 1, all persons are by nature free and independent and have certain inalienable inherited rights. Among these are the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and the right to keep and bear arms for security or defense of self, family, home, and others, and for the lawful common defense, hunting, recreational use, and all other lawful purposes. And such rights shall not be denied or infringed by the state or any other subdivision thereof. I think that's pretty clear. So everybody that's got all bent out of shape because the mayor of Omaha and the mayor of Lincoln don't want it, it's because of preemption. They want a gun registry.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Kauth, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of LB 77 and oppose the motion to recommit. I strongly support our Second Amendment and admire Senator Brewer's persistence and commitment to that Second Amendment. I also appreciate his willingness to make adjustments to the bill to better reflect the urban concerns and to work with Omaha Police Officers Association to improve the bill. Senator Brewer, I yield you time.
4 minutes, 35 seconds. Senator Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. President. All right, let's go back and go through some of what Senator Jacobson said. It has been a 7-year labor to try and get this into law. Between testimony committee and filibusters and poll motions, we're on hour 43. Just digest that for a minute. 43 hours we have fought to give a constitutional right to the people that's in the Constitution. Remember the struggle I had because we sent this 3 years ago to the Attorney General, and we had a carve-out for Lincoln and Omaha. We were trying to do the right thing. Every other county in Nebraska had declared themselves Second Amendment counties. And the Attorney General come back and said, as state senators, you legislate for all of Nebraska. You cannot carve out parts of it and only legislate for it. So they found the bill unconstitutional. And I was forced to take that bill and turn it into a bill that helped Lincoln and Omaha with securing of guns. So we went back to the drawing board, and the hundreds of hours and all of the attorneys and the attorney generals from the last and the current that have looked at this, I will tell you that it has been gone through with a fine-tooth comb. And you may not like the wording in a certain sentence, but just step back and think about the simple fact of what we're trying to do here. We can't carve out, so we have to work with the entire state of Nebraska. And when we do that, for some reason, it is the rest of the state that seems very concerned and committed to try and get constitutional carry. So obviously, if it doesn't get through this year, I'll be back next year. It's not something like I'm gonna walk away from. That's how much I believe in it. That's how much I believe in the Constitution. And you guys can say what you want about being too committed to the Constitution. But there are some of us that have paid a very dear price for that Constitution. So we seem committed is for a reason. So if we go back and try and establish the groundwork on 77 and not get too wrapped up in emotion, let's just do that for a moment. This would authorize the concealed carry without a permit by people who can legally possess a firearm. Pretty straightforward. It would require that a person immediately notify a law enforcement officer or emergency responder upon contact while carrying a concealed weapon. I think that's fairly straightforward too. Now, you've heard the rambling about, well, you could be carrying a bazooka or a handful of brass knuckles. Again, this is just a way to confuse the issue and try and figure out a way to kill the bill. There are those who do not want to openly, publicly admit that they hate the Second Amendment and would like to do away with it. So they do it through tactics like this. What will LB 77 not do? Well, it will not allow felons.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Perpetrators of domestic violence are those with dangerous mental illness or other prohibited persons from carrying a weapon. It would not change the list of locations where concealed weapons, concealed handguns are prohibited. It would not stop businesses from prohibiting weapons on their premises. They simply put a sign in the front door, just as they do now. and it would not change the requirement for a background check in order to buy a gun. That's one of the things that make me so frustrated in here. You can get up and say anything on the mic, but again, go down and try and buy a gun without a background check. See what happens. It isn't going to happen. The pistol permit part is still required. You get that through the sheriff in your county, and that is his opportunity to go back and look at issues such as mental health or other crimes.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Senator Vargas, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you very much. I am in support of the recommit to committee for different reasons, actually, which I'll explain, and I'm opposed to LB 77. I have been in the past. This is nothing new. I respect Senator Brewer beyond belief, and I think that's important to then just rephrase here, especially in the final reading, which is it is possible to respect the people bringing each of these bills. It's also possible to disagree on policy. For me, it's not about emotion. It's not about whether or not he is wrong or right in the absolute, because the bills that we passed are dictating what is wrong or right in the nature of we're passing legislation. So I'm not judging Senator Brewer for saying he is wrong, but I think it's okay and healthy for our body to disagree on the policy. And I think that's important for us to just reframe when we're talking about these issues. So in my disagreement, and I've made this clear in the past, for me, it's not necessarily only because there might be differences in what's happening in rural Nebraska versus urban Nebraska. And I understand this rationale for treating the entire state the same way, but it's also not that simple. There are instances where we do create differences in how we create legislation for different congressional districts or different municipalities of different sizes, of different counties. We have done that before. In fact, the laws currently on the books create these different laws that provide local control. It has been on the books. I want to continue to support the local control. On behalf of my constituents, I have still heard, and for me, it's not a wait and see, and it's not a tactic, and I'm not saying it's a tactic either way on either side. I am not saying that more time is necessarily going to make this bill better. For me, I continue to hear from my constituents that this is something that they don't want to pass. I have heard from my mayor in Omaha and from our police chief that they're against this bill, not solely on the basis of preemption. Not solely on the basis that we're not going to, just because they don't like being told what to do. Look, I got bills that are fine with telling municipalities what to do. They don't like being told what to do when it comes to public safety in regards to guns. That's the issue. It's not just on being told what to do. That's the reason why I may repose to this. Because I continue to hear from people in my constituency, I think to Senator Frederickson's point, that are not trying to say, maybe it is different for rural Nebraska. Maybe it is different for different counties outside of a city like Omaha or Lincoln. Maybe it is. But for the people in our district or in my district that are saying more so than the opposition right now, we don't want to change this law and we want to support what our local elected officials are deeming best for the public safety. That's why I remain opposed to this bill. The second thing I want to react to is, and again, I have respect for Senator Jacobson. I disagree with his comments on states with some of the soft targets are the places or the weakest laws. And it's not about emotion for me. I have this map that was handed out, firearm mortality by state. If you're looking at the states that have some of the least restrictive gun laws, have the highest firearm mortality by state. Now, we may be picking and choosing when we're talking on the mic about real consequences in terms of mass shootings. When I'm looking at this map, the places that have the least restrictions on firearms or gun laws are the places where we have the highest mortality. It's not soft targets. The places that already have these looser laws or doing things like what we're doing right now, for whatever the reason may be, for whatever the senator may be, are the places that have the highest mortality for gun deaths. So colleagues, this is not about emotion. This is about whether or not we agree with the bill on behalf of our constituency, like every single issue. And afterwards, it's also whether or not we can still look at each other and say, I respect for you what you're trying to do for your constituency for the state, which I will absolutely do after this with Senator Brewer. I want to make sure we get back to that. And with that, I still remain opposed to LB 77 for the reasons that I stated. And I know everybody will vote how they've been viewing this issue.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Vargas. Senator Merman has guests in the north balcony. High schoolers from Holdridge High School, please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature. Senator Bostman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraska. I think we'll come back to what Senator Brewer's been talking about is we're talking about the ability of an individual who has a right to bear an arm, a handgun, or others, law-abiding citizens, to be able to continue to do that, and if so happens to carry as concealed. Law-abiding citizens, someone who's never had a criminal activity that prevents them from carrying a firearm. Remember that every person, as far as a handgun goes, every person who purchases or has a handgun has to have a background check. You either have to go to the county and get a handgun permit, or you go and get a concealed carry permit, one of the two, and both of those require background checks. All the current laws that prohibit someone from carrying continue to stay in place. It doesn't change that. You cannot go to another state and purchase a handgun. You cannot give a handgun to another person to own. It's yours. It's your safekeeping. I spoke before on general and select file about training. We have thousands upon thousands of students in this state who compete with handguns, with long guns, with .22 rifles, with shotguns, in competition year-round in this state. The largest national trap shooting event in the country is in Donovan, Nebraska, coming up the first part of May. Thousands over 3 days of kids will be there and shoot. They're all required before they can start that competition or start the training to have safety training. Hunter safety courses or other training, whether it be with a handgun, a long gun, either one. There's been that training been going on for a long time. And again, we're talking about law-abiding citizens. 21 states, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Maine, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, West Virginia, and Wyoming already allow law-abiding individuals to carry a concealed handgun without a government-issued permit. I believe it's been testified or has been stated on the record before that those states who actually have a concealed carry permit opportunity, constitutional carry on that side, more individuals take the concealed handgun permit training and receive that training and certification. Constitutional carry simply allows a person who is otherwise legally able to possess and carry a firearm to do so in a discreet, concealed manner. Constitutional carry does not change prohibited persons' laws or any law governing the misuse of a firearm, illegal brandishing, discharge, threatening, etc. Prohibit places where a firearm cannot be carried or when force may be used in defense or of self or others. Private property owners still maintain discretion over their own property, including whether and on what terms to allow firearms. We've heard some talk about long guns, about AK-47s. Any automatic firearm in this country, you have to have a special federal permit. No one can carry that unless you have a special permit. Again, we're talking about a law-abiding citizen. I feel a constitutional right, something that we all hold very dearly to ourselves and to others. I, as like Senator Brewer, spent 20 years defending that right. I stand opposed to the recommit. I support LB 77 to its fullest, and I urge everyone to vote green on LB 77. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Brandt, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Brewer, for bringing LB 77, and thank you, colleagues, for a very well-reasoned debate this morning. It's been echoed, and I'll say it, LB 77 is about legal gun ownership. Would Senator Bosson be available for a question?
Senator Bostoman, will you yield for question?
Bosson.
Excuse me. Senator Boson, will you yield to some questions?
Sure.
Thank you, Senator Bosson. There's a lot of concern. I get a lot of emails about this. There's a lot of concern that everybody's going to stuff a gun in their pocket and that things are going to happen. Today, regarding the law, and tomorrow, when this passes, whether it's concealed carry or constitutional carry, an individual pulls a gun out of their pocket and waves it at another individual, what would be the charge on that?
Is this during a dispute?
This is, yeah, probably. I mean, just say two guys are having words.
That would fall under terroristic threats. If you're using the weapon, you can also enhance the charge with terroristic threats with use of a weapon.
So really, anybody that would be threatened in this manner has the right to call the police or the sheriff's department and have them come out, investigate, and the county attorney's office would or could charge them with terroristic threat.
Under the fact pattern that you've given me, if someone is having a dispute and feels threatened by the presence of the firearm, they could call the police, indicate what's going on, and I believe the police would investigate that, potentially refer that to the county attorney's office for prosecution under a terroristic threats, potentially a disturbing the peace, potentially the use of a weapon during the commission of either one of those crimes.
So there is no free pass if this law were to pass to anybody with constitutional carry?
Under the fact pattern that you've given me, no.
Okay, so let's move on to alcohol. How much alcohol can a individual consume and have a concealed carry weapon on them?
It's my understanding under this law that you can neither consume alcohol nor have alcohol in your body, blood, breath, or urine, while carrying a handgun.
So if they have any alcohol in their system at all, they are in violation of the law. Would that be correct?
Based on my reading of this, I believe that's correct.
What about narcotics?
Same.
All right. Thank you, Senator Bosson. I appreciate the background on that. I know there's concern about police officers. In talking to my sheriff's departments, and I do live in a rural part of the state, when they stop an individual today, they just assume they have a weapon. That's today. And that's before this law passes. And I think there's a great deal of care, and we have a great deal of support for our law officers out there. As Senator Bosselman mentioned, 21 states today have constitutional carry. And when we opened this debate this morning, there were discussions about AR-15s. This is specifically about concealed handguns, not long guns, not AR-15s. When you go to Nebraska statute 28-1201 defines the terms of many things, but number 3, handgun means any firearm with a barrel less than 16 inches in length or any firearm designed to be held and fired by the use of a single hand. There's definitions in here for machine guns, there's definitions for long guns, there's definitions in here on brass knuckles, on any dangerous weapons in the state. I welcome you to go and research that. LB 77 also creates a new charge of carrying a firearm during the commission of a dangerous misdemeanor. That addresses some of the concerns that Senators Dungan and Kavanaugh had about existing law and the interaction with that. And we've got a third-time offense that's a class 4 felony. To wrap it up, I'm opposed to the recommit, and I fully support LB 77. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brandt. Senators Holdcroft and Arch have visitors in the south balcony. Fourth graders from Walnut Creek Elementary in Papillion, please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President, your Committee on Education, chaired by Senator Merwin, reports Legislative Bill 708 to general file. Additionally, amendments to be printed for Senator Raybold to LB 754, a new LR 101 from Senator Day that'll be laid over. That's all I have this time.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Brewer, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. All right, I'm going to go back and, since I didn't get an opening, do an opening. 43rd hour, we're about to start. Oh, we are in the 44th hour now of filibuster. And I say that more than anything to remind folks back home that are just tuning in and hearing this for the first time, the process that we've gone through to get to this point. So we've gone through the process of trying to carve out. As we said before, that didn't work. So last year, we made it a comprehensive bill. We got through the poll motion. We got to general file, select file, and it was in select file that Senator Pauls at that time was ill, later passed, and left me a vote short there. So you can see how I have been in a place where you put enough energy and effort into a bill that in your district is a 90-some% winner that everyone wants, and you struggle when you have others who find reasons to avoid wanting to give to the people a constitutional right. And that was actually brought up earlier. They said, you know, you're going down the wrong road here. What you need to do is do a ballot initiative and have the people vote on it. And the Attorney General reminded me that you can't do that because it's already in the Constitution. And all of a sudden I stepped back and I thought, wow. So I am desperately trying to get a bill passed that's already in the Constitution. So I can't do a ballot initiative. I can't carve out. We've banged our head on every route possible with this bill. So I've got to follow Senator Jacobson's lead and tell you that those who are opposed are opposed. And there is nothing that can be said on this mic that will ever change their mind. And those that support it and understand it, they support it and they understand it. And that's where we are here today. Now, we have to go 2 hours. And we're going to hit a point here where we go over all the issues. And we're going to just, unlike other times, you can get up and leave. You're trapped. So I'm going to make an offer. If we get through enough of the issues of 77, because I have the unique history of having been shot, I would take some time and share that with you What I will share comes from a book called The Boneyard. It is about a firefight in Afghanistan. And I want folks to understand that this was not an easy thing to take up this challenge, because if you're on the receiving end of a bullet, and in the case of the 12th day of October 2003, 7 of them, you understand how that can change and impact lives. But I also understand how important it is for those who feel that protecting their home, protecting their business, protecting their family are the most important thing in the world to them.
1 minute.
And that we should not dictate to them their ability to do and have that right. Because unlike, as we've said before, driver's license and other things, a constitutional right is just that, a right. It is not a privilege that you're given. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Senator Breezy, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I rise today in support of LB 77, and I thank Senator Brewer for his relentless efforts in protecting our Second Amendment rights. I want to address some of the conversation that had occurred previously surrounding law enforcement in this piece of legislation. I understand there may be some law enforcement leaders and organizations out there who have some hesitancy around this bill, but they're certainly not the majority. Since this bill was introduced, I have heard from law enforcement officers, sheriffs, and a chief of police in my district who have been absolutely behind these efforts to expand and protect our Second Amendment rights here in Nebraska. I've not heard from a single law enforcement officer, police chief, or sheriff in my district who has any reservations about this bill. And I've heard from a lot of constituents in my district, probably 95% of whom are completely in favor of LB 77. You know, I come from a place where when I was a kid, we started hunting and shooting guns when we were 7 or 8 years old. And out where I come from, we really want our Second Amendment rights protected. And again, I thank Senator Brewer for his efforts here. And so I'd urge my colleagues to consider what one police chief called that, quote, great big state that exists outside of Lincoln and Omaha and I-80, unquote, and consider a green vote here, support this bill. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I would yield the balance of my time to Senator Brewer.
Thank you, Senator Breezy. Senator Brewer, that's 3 minutes, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Breezy. Again, we need to go over some of these details to make sure that it is on the record. And the issue of any drugs or alcohol in your system, I'm glad that was brought up, and that was an absolutely accurate statement. We built that in on purpose. We did that at the recommendations of law enforcement. We also, with law enforcement, made the requirement that just as with the concealed carry permit program, that they are required to do the same action. So upon being stopped, you provide information at that time that you're concealed carrying, and then the officer will tell you what actions you're to take next. And that was just part of those checks that we went through to make sure this bill protected law enforcement, because we didn't want to be in a position where we made their lives more difficult. We talked about background checks. Again, I invite you to go down, pick the gun store, go in and try to buy a gun without. If it's a handgun, you go down to the courthouse, pay for a pistol permit. That pistol permit is issued to you. With that is a background check. Your other option is to go through the State Patrol permitting program, have that permit, and then when you go in to purchase, you use that as your authorization. So that I hope is clear to everyone. Now, we've talked a lot about gun violence. What I would ask you to also remember is that what we're going to do is we're going to take everything bad, everything evil that anyone has done here in the United States, and we're going to say, you know what, we are going to restrict Nebraskans from being able to have this constitutional right because of what happened in California, New York. You pick it. How fair is that? If we have low rates of crime, of murders, it's because we have good law enforcement, and by letting law-abiding citizens have the right to protect themselves, how are we changing any of those dynamics? We cannot stress enough that this is not about criminals.
1 minute.
Criminals are going to be criminals. I did not want to see this turn into a back and forth on emotion, and I understand. So Senator Vargas said, well, it's not about emotion. It is about emotion because, did you say something? Oh, how much time do I have left?
30 seconds.
Okay, I'll rush it. One of the things that we have to throw in here at some point is talking about how can we help law enforcement. And the offer I made to Senator Rabel was, let's have a bill that will authorize resource officers in every school who needs them, whether it be through a grant program where they ask for it, because some schools may not need it, we make it available. That way we have schools that if they need it and want it, it's possible for them to have it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Senator Halloran, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraska. I'm standing in full support of LB 77 and in opposition to the recommit to committee motion. Colleagues, today would be the most appropriate day to pass LB 77. Today marks the 238th anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord, which kicked off the Revolutionary War. Unless these men and women exercised these rights to bear their arms and create a militia, the war for our independence would not have started. The British attempted to take away the guns of the colonists, and it was met with a resounding over our dead bodies. And they won the war, giving us independence. Ultimately, wrote a constitution that laid out our rights, God-given rights, not granted by the government, but by God. And of course, one of those we're debating today, and that's the Second Amendment. So what exactly does history show about gun confiscation and gun restrictions? In 1911 in Turkey, guns were restricted. And as a result, 1.5 million Armenians were unable to defend themselves and were ethnically cleansed by the government. They were killed. In 1929, the former Soviet Union established gun control, and as a result, Stalin's government killed 40 million Soviets. Hitler in Nazi Germany established his version of gun control in 1938, where millions of Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, mentally ill, disabled, and eventually some of the brown shirts who worked for the government were killed. In 1935, communist China established gun control, and 50 million political dissidents were arrested and killed. In 1964 to 1981, Guatemala established gun control, and 100,000 were killed. In 1970, Uganda established gun control, and from 1970 through 1979, 300,000 Christians were killed by a dictatorial government. In 1975 through 1977, Cambodia gun restriction laws prevented people from defending themselves against a tyrannical government who arrested and killed 1 million people. In 1994, Rwanda disarmed the Tutsi people, and being unable to defend themselves, 1 million were executed. Overall, over 70 million people, because they had no means of defending themselves, were killed. It's a fundamental right, and I have the deepest respect for Senator Brewer for enhancing and defending that right to bear arms. How much time do I have?
1 minute, 45 seconds.
There's been a lot of talk about training, the need for more training if we pass this law, and that's good, and that's fine. There will be. I have jokingly suggested to a few people that maybe next year I will sponsor a bill that will require all criminals to take gun safety courses. Now think about that. That'd be a good idea, right? They commit most of the crimes, the murders. They should have gun safety courses. Well, of course, it's a silly idea. It's one more of those instances. Senator Jacobson pointed out that criminals don't care about the law, so they're not going to take the gun safety course. It's a silly idea.
1 minute.
But what's not a silly idea is to have more citizens armed through constitutional carry. And you know who's opposed to that, mostly, besides a handful of people here in this body? Who's opposed to that mostly are criminals, because when they're doing their job, their vocation, their occupation of being a criminal, the last thing they want are more citizens in the crowd that might be bearing arms and defending themselves and the people around them and taking the criminal out. So vote green on LB 77. I yield the balance of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Halloran. Senator Blood, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise against the motion to recommit, but also against LB 77, and Senator Brewer is aware of that. I am standing not to talk as much about the bill, but about some of the consequences, be they good or bad, that I would like to see as a result of this very, very long debate. So I'm going to tell a story, and it's not to pull at your heartstrings, it's to prove a point. Ryan Hilbert, 28, Nathan Pastrana, 22, dead. Kenneth Gerner, 25, Zoe Lujan, wounded. 3 others fled. Remember those numbers. At 9:23, the first call to police, it was reported that a U-Haul truck was on fire with some wires and tubes sticking out of it, and there was a possible bomb. At 9:24, shots were fired. At 9:26, the first units, because we have an awesome law enforcement in Bellevue, we're looking for a 6-foot 6-inch tall suspect. At 9:31, police received information on how to locate the suspect, and at 9:39, the suspect was in custody. This was the sonic shooting that happened in November of 2020, November 21st, 2020 in Bellevue. And Silva threw an explosive device into a rental truck and opened a fire on the staff. And the reason that he did that is because he had been arrested for using someone else's payment methods to obtain food items from the same Sonic restaurant just days before shooting. And the day before the incident, he had been released from custody. And many of you might remember him as the smiling shooter that made national news because the guy had mental health issues. He did have a concealed carry permit, which is not part of the issue, it's just part of the facts. Excuse me, I don't know if I said concealed carry. Concealed carry permit. He drove the U-Haul truck to the Sonic restaurant and opened fire. The reason I'm telling you the story is not to preach to you about guns. I'm telling you this story because we've heard throughout this debate about mental health. The 3 that fled witnessed the massacre. And you always hear the thoughts and the prayers, and we're going to help our employees any way we can. Well, one of the young women who was under the age of 20, and you guys all stood here on the mic and said people's brains aren't developed, and how hard it is for people to make decisions and deal with crises before age 25 on other bills here this year. She was diagnosed with severe PTSD, and guess what, in Nebraska, when you witness something like that, our workman's comp will not cover that. Even if diagnosed by a professional, a trained professional, you cannot get coverage for PTSD on workman's comp. Now, you can if you're a first responder. I'm sure Senator McDonald can tell you all about that. And I've been a part of many of those conversations and committees because they know that when you experience things like that, it's traumatic. It doesn't have to be directed at you. You just have to be there to experience it. And if you know any veterans, you know that PTSD is real. It's not make-believe. So when we talk about these issues, I think it's interesting how in this body, we don't really give a damn outside of the issue. It was the bankers that came out against my bill, LB5, because God forbid there should be a holdup at a bank and somebody witnesses violence and they have PTSD. Why should they be held responsible? I just want you to be thinking about that as we pursue this discussion. And I also want to point out that I remember the time when the NRA used to be primarily about safe and proper use of firearms. In fact, I remember the Army used to donate surplus weapons to them for training, and New York State donated, I think, their first training range, firing range. They even participated in good policy like the National Firearms Act of 1934 and the Gun Control Act of 1938. And then they realized, as many groups have over the last few decades, that there was money to be had by instilling fear and making us further apart than working together on good policy and working together on gun safety. And I really think that's unfortunate, because now this is what we're left with. And so if you're not familiar with the history, if you only know the history of NRA in the last decade or two, I think you should look back at it.
That's your time, Senator. Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Von Gilleren, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to start off today addressing a few comments that have been made on the floor on this topic, important topic. I want to first address a few things that Senator Raybould said. And forgive me if I didn't get the quotes exactly, but the comment that was made that we need to disconnect the mental health conversation from the gun conversation. And I really struggle with that. And I want to thank Senator Blood for just visiting on that topic more specifically and about how closely linked these two issues are. Clearly, we do have a mental health crisis in the United States and even in Nebraska. And unfortunately, many who are suffering from mental health issues use weapons to injure and kill others. And seriously, an unfortunate situation. But we cannot and should not limit the rights of law-abiding Nebraskans due to the unfortunate illness of a few, especially when limiting those rights may actually put you in a position to defend yourself and others from those who are mentally ill. Senator Raybould also stated that Nebraska is in the top 10 for lowest gun deaths, and she believes that this is due to our current gun laws. I contest that it's due to the fact that by and large we have a responsible citizenry here in Nebraska. And that's a point that Senator Bosselman clarified in talking about the high school trap and skeet competition that takes place here. And something else that occurred to me as I was making my notes, that all of these same arguments were made a number of years ago when permitted concealed carry was debated and passed in this body. You can pull up the testimonies from that debate, and they're nearly identical to what we're hearing today. Senator Raybould also stated that she simply wants to work with Senator Brewer to somehow improve LB 77, and I make air quotes for the transcribers. Clearly, that has not been her motivation prior to today, because in the previous 10 hours of debate, Senator Raybould has made it a point to clarify that Americans own too many guns, and that is the problem. So let's not fall for the let's give it some more time, let's give this some more study, let's fine-tune the language. All of that's a red herring to kill the bill, so let's not be fooled. Senator John Kavanaugh stated that criminals will somehow be incented to carry a concealed weapon. Really? We're talking about criminals in the act of committing a crime. Do we really believe that they're concerned about whether the manner in which they're carrying a weapon is legal or not? I think that's the last thing going through their minds. I said in a previous floor statement that if we could simply pass a law and magically all people would be protected, I'd be the first in line to sign it. But that unfortunately is not the case, because criminals don't care. Senator Bosselman pointed out that background checks are still required, and I want to read through some of the questions that are required in that background check to be responded to by the applicant. First, must be at least 21 years of age. Second, not be prohibited from purchasing or possessing a handgun by federal law. Third, possess sufficient powers of eyesight. Fourth, not have pled guilty or no contest to or not have been convicted of a felony. Fifth, not have pled guilty or no contest to or not have been convicted of a misdemeanor crime or of violence within the immediate preceding 10 years. 6, not have been found in the previous 10 years to be mentally ill and dangerous person and not to be currently adjudged mentally incompetent. 7, have been a Nebraska resident for at least 180 days, except for the military. 8, have not violated any law relating to firearms, unlawful use of a weapon, or controlled substances in the preceding 10 years. 9, not be on parole, probation, house arrest, or work release. I know lots of people that own guns, and I know lots of people who don't own guns. And this is a topic that comes up in conversations in all different environments. I've not heard one person say, you know, I own a gun and I've never carried it, and I'm going to start carrying it tomorrow if this law passes. And I certainly have heard nobody say, I'm going to run out and buy a gun the day that this passes and start dropping it in my pocket.
1 minute.
That simply is not the case. Just want to point out quickly in my closing, just some people and entities that use guns to protect themselves. Let's just be serious about this. The president, celebrities, banks, courts, jewelry stores, sporting events, music festivals. But in large part, we defend our children in schools with a sign that says this is a gun-free zone, and then we call someone with a gun when something goes wrong. I urge you to vote down the motion to recommit and to vote green on LB 77 to protect our constitutional rights clearly stated in the Nebraska Constitution. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Von Giller. And Senator Lowe, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Once again, the Bill of Rights in Nebraska. All persons are by nature free and independent and have certain inherent and inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And over the past couple of months, we've found out that life isn't as important as the pursuit of happiness. And to keep the right to keep and bear arms for the security of defense and self, family, home, and others, and for the lawful common defense, hunting, and recreational use, and all other lawful purposes. And such rights shall not be denied or infringed by the state or any subdivision thereof. That's in Nebraska's Constitution. That's right underneath the preamble. It is important to Nebraskans. And now I'm going to bring a knife to a gunfight. If I have a hunting knife on my hip with a 5-inch blade.
Yeah, I can't see the cue.
I have it on my hip. It's a legal weapon to have on my hip. I use it for cleaning deer or pheasants or turkey. I'm perfectly legal to have it. If I take my coat and put my coat on, that knife without this is an illegal weapon. I'm still the same guy. The knife is still the same weapon. And all I've done is put on a coat. I don't intend to use it in any other way but what I had it for in the first place. With this legislation, I am now legal once again. Let's bring a knife to a gunfight. 74% of all gun deaths in Nebraska are suicide. This legislation has nothing to do with 74% of the deaths in our state. The largest, besides that, is homicide. Now, a lot of those people that are committing homicide don't care if their gun is concealed or not, or if they get arrested or not. They're not obeying the law in the first place. We have enough laws on our books to prevent guns from killing people. What we're trying to do with this is to make it so law-abiding citizens are not unintentionally breaking the law. That's all we're doing. By putting on a coat, I can break the law. That is what we have now. That is not what we need to be worried about in the Nebraska Legislature. With that, I yield the rest of my time to Senator Brewer.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Senator Brewer, that's 1 minute, 20 seconds.
All right, I will try and hurry here. One of the issues we did talk about, which was a very legitimate issue, was the issue of training. So as it currently is with the concealed carry permit, you need between $200 and $300. That is to cover the cost of the training and the actual physical permit. And part of that is a program of instruction, a POI that you have to follow through and pass. So the concern was, how do we provide training at no cost? And it was actually Nebraskans who came up with the answer on this. Trish Harold, who's the president of the Nebraska Farm Owners Association, has built an online program that will allow individuals to go online and go through, and I won't have a chance to read through all these, but I will give you a quick overview and finish up later. But it is a from start to finish, everything you need to know in order to go from the purchasing through the cleaning, range operations with a firearm, and that's set up to be done at no cost. So
that's your time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Senator Berman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got a lot of correspondence from my office concerning LB 77, and probably over 90% has been positive toward 77. I recently got an email from a constituent that on the western edge of the district, maybe northwestern edge, and it was a beautiful picture of a trail cam, a picture from that trail cam of a huge mountain lion, long tail, black tip, and he told me, well, this is the reason we're for 77 in District 38. So it's pretty easy to realize in rural Nebraska why a lot of my constituents would be for LB 77. Carrying guns is pretty common for hunting and self-protection from animals and those kinds of things. So it's a pretty easy decision out there. You know, we don't want to make criminals out of someone that's just exercising their constitutional right, whether it's concealed carry or open carry, whether it's a cold day or a hot day, whether or not they're wearing a coat. This subject has been a huge part of what Senator Brewer's done for the last 7 years. And the bill that we have before us today has been vetted and massaged and debated from every angle. And I think we have a good bill right now to vote on today. Colorado, you know, we talk about the surrounding states, what their gun laws are, and I think Colorado has some of the toughest gun laws of all of our surrounding states. And if you think about it, where have the mass shootings most commonly been around us? And I think the answer would be Colorado. When a person's made a criminal for having any guns, only criminals will have guns. I know that's a cliche, but it's really true. And, you know, criminals don't follow the law, and we definitely don't want to make criminals out of law-abiding citizens. And another cliche is it's not the gun that's doing the killing, it's the person behind the gun. In other words, it's the person operating the trigger. So I am here in strong support of LB 77 and against the motion to recommit, and I will give the rest of my time to Senator Brewer.
Thank you, Senator Merman. Senator Brewer, that's 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Merman. All right, let's go back to where we left off. So if you want to think about all of the issues, if you're going to have a concealed carry program, just listen and I'll run through these so you get some idea what's included in it. Firearm safety, introduction to semi-automatic handguns, introduction to revolvers, how to load and unload a revolver, how to load and unload a semi-automatic handgun, handgun firing and fundamentals, responsible firearm storage, handgun cleaning and maintenance, methods of concealment, methods and techniques of increasing personal safety and interdicting risk, conflict avoidance, and de-escalating best practices, introduction to handgun ammunition, handgun malfunctions, introduction to shooting ranges, interaction with law enforcement, interaction
1 minute.
with emergency medical personnel, prohibited places, Nebraska self-defense laws, Nebraska laws pertaining to the purchase, ownership, and transportation of firearms, federal laws pertaining to the purchase, ownership, transportation of firearms, effects of stress and cognitive physical abilities in defensive situations, cover, concealment, and duty to retreat, personal defense laws in the home, and setting up a personal training program. This is what they've developed on an online program for free that would be available if 77 passes. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Senator DeKay, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today in total support of LB 77 that Senator Brewer has brought. I have to say I respect Senator Brewer for the 7 years that he has committed himself to this body and to this bill. And I also have to say I have the utmost respect for Senator Brewer for the sacrifice that he has given with his own body to protect our Constitution. With that, I yield the rest of my time to Senator Brewer.
Thank you, Senator DeKay. Senator Brewer, that's 4 minutes, 20 seconds.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator DeKay. All right. One of the issues that we've heard back and forth on was the Heller decision. And in there, Justice Scalia was quoted and admitted that there are some limits to the right to keep and bear arms. But I think we need to go a little farther in looking at that. They jumped to the conclusion that any restriction that they want is justified by that. Well, under the wonderful thing about the Supreme Court is that when politicians willfully misread laws and the Constitution, that court is there to correct that. Supreme Court corrected the gun-hating politicians across the country last year with the Bruin decision. And let's talk a little about that Bruin decision. Okay, the right to keep and bear arms is not just about keeping a gun in your home. In the Bruin decision in the court, the Second and 14th Amendments protect individuals' right to carry a handgun for self-defense outside the home. Now, we've had questions about where you can carry. And we need to read this in, make sure it's all clear. And some have already asked, but let's just roll this up so everybody's on the same sheet of music here. LB 77 has the following restrictions. You cannot carry in a bar, cannot carry in churches, cannot carry in hospitals, cannot carry in banks, cannot carry in schools or at school events. You cannot carry in government buildings or courtrooms. I say again, courtrooms. You cannot carry at meetings of government bodies. You cannot carry in political rallies. You cannot carry at pro or semi-pro sporting events. You cannot carry in police stations, jails, prisons. So there are restrictions that have to be followed. But that's the part that I want to stress to folks is that you could perceive by the first few minutes of this 2-hour filibuster that this is going to be a free-for-all. And as a result of that, everyone is in danger. There are tremendous restrictions that are put on. I don't necessarily agree with all those restrictions, but I also respect the fact that there needs to be some oversight and limits on where you carry firearms. And so as we go through this, remember, if you're under 21, you can't carry. This does not authorize you to carry. If you have any detectable alcohol or drugs, you are required, once again, whether it be emergency responders or law enforcement, upon contact, to notify them. So please understand that as we're going through this, we can tweak this bill more. There's all kinds of things you could do. But we have put so many hours in and so many changes to get it to where it's at now.
1 minute.
That I believe we've got a product that truly does do what the people have asked of us. It puts in safety restrictions with the availability of training. I think there's a point you have to step back and say, you know, let's give the people the constitutional right that they should have had in the first place and understand that it's not done without being responsible in the way we do it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Senator Moser announces some guests in the South Balcony, fourth graders from Lost Creek Elementary in Columbus. Please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature. Senator Walls, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield my time to Senator Raybould.
Senator Raybould, that's 4 minutes, 54 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Walls. You know, we talk about these issues of gun safety because tomorrow is the anniversary of Columbine High School. This morning, 2 young teenage girls, cheerleaders in Texas, just got shot by mistakenly getting into the wrong carpool vehicle, particularly as they hopped out and were leaving in another correct vehicle. We talk about this because an 84-year-old man who is not a criminal mistakenly shot a young black kid who accidentally went to the wrong house to pick up his siblings. We talk about it because the property owner saw a vehicle enter his property, didn't know who it was, and as the vehicle realized and made a mistake in the wrong drive, they turned around and they drove away. He shot at them. He killed one young woman. So we're not talking about criminals. We're talking about people with guns. And I respect Senator Brewer 100%, but I think all credit goes to Senator Wishart because she wins the valor for being the most persistent and having presented a medical marijuana bill for the last 7 years and going through 2 horrific ballot petition drives. I respect the Second Amendment, but there is a reason why it is the Second Amendment that comes both after this inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in our Nebraska Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. And when we look to other states as their best practice of government, as businesses do all the time, we want to learn how to keep our people safer. We're going to talk about gun rights. Gun rights, gun rights. What about the rights of all those innocent children and adults gunned down? The whining of the gun rights lobbyists is being drowned out by the unrelenting wailing from devastated parents, families, and communities as they grieve and mourn the senseless slaughter of their children and loved ones. We have a moral imperative to take action. Are we just going to surrender to this one nation under guns? S.E. Cupp, a Republican commentator, said, "There's no life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness for the families of the Nashville shooting, nor the families of tens of thousands of victims of gun violence every year." In an editorial page in the Lincoln Journal-Star on April 4th, it's from a columnist. Her title piece was "Zombie Politicians Are Letting Guns Kill People." She states, "There is no making moral sense of the political zombies who take orders from the National Rifle Association." She goes on and says, "It's not just the guns themselves, it's the worship of them." The responsible gun owners I speak with, and my son is one of them, who is an avid and gifted hunter, want the same thing that the majority of Americans and Nebraskans want, like universal background checks, more training on handling and safe storage, raising the minimum to purchase, bans on high-capacity magazines, and yes, even red flag laws and the suicide risk protection order that I had proposed this session. The Constitution says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Let's dive into what that really means. Regulated militia. The word regulated means controlled, rules, restrained, delimited, meaning having fixed boundaries or limits, ordered and structured. Why are we supporting a concealed carry bill that does none of the above? No permit, no training, and no background check. How is
1
this bill
minute.
keeping, thank you, Mr. President, our children, families, and law enforcement safe? The current concealed carry law that we have on our books today, no one's challenged it. No one's got up and said, this is taking away my Second Amendment rights. Justice Antonin Scalia, conservative constitutionalist, stated, like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. It is not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purpose. Yes, paying a reasonable fee happens to be one of them. You pay a fee for the hunting and fishing license, also enshrined in our Nebraska Constitution. You pay a fee for a driver's license. You pay for a stamp when you put it on your vote by mail ballot. The truth is that no law-abiding citizen has ever been denied access to purchasing a firearm. We have every right to impose reasonable, common sense gun safety measures that the majority of Nebraskans
That's your
and
time,
the
Senator.
majority of Americans approve.
Thank you, Senator Raybold. Senator Conrad has guests in the north balcony from North Star High School. Please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature. Senator Holdcroft, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of LB 77 and opposed to the recommit. And I'm afraid Senator Holleran has stolen my thunder this morning. I was going to talk also about the anniversary of Lexington and Concord. And also because we have ships in the United States Navy that have been named after those great battles, Lexington, Concord, and also Bunker Hill. And we do that for a reason, because we honored the commitment that was made by those early revolutionaries to defend our rights, because, of course, for those battles, the redcoats were coming, and they were coming to take the arms of the militias. And so that was going to be somewhat of my talk, but I thought a quick shift. I would read some of the email that I've received in support of LB 77. Just a few notes. Dear Senator Holcroft, please honor your oath by supporting my Second Amendment rights and hold the line in defense of the freedoms of Nebraska by advancing LB 77. A nation that resists its people's ability, that restrains its people's ability to own arms for defense, is a nation comprised of slaves. The right to keep and bear arms serves as a bulwark against all forms of coercion and safeguards against encroachments upon our other cherished liberties. Ultimately, Senator Brewer's bill, LB 77, is an important step in restoring just government to Nebraska. While there is a clear divide between the urban and rural areas with Nebraska, our God-given rights do not recognize arbitrary boundaries placed upon the citizenry by an unjust government. Accordingly, if we wish to have a rebirth of liberty within this nation, we must passionately strive to defend the freedoms that are the natural birthright of all humanity, and that effort begins with the sovereign states adhering to their mandate to preserve the liberties of its citizens. Let me read another. Thank you, Senators, for all your hard work and courage during this session. LB 77 is another bill we need. I speak to you now as a parent of a 22-year-old who works nights. I worry about her safety constantly. She has been harassed by customers and has a homeless man that hangs out in and lives in his car in the parking lot of her store. She and other female workers have to walk out to their cars past this man every night at 9:30. It only takes one time for her life to either be ended or be changed forever. This is the reality for many, many people. When I first moved to Lincoln, I was surprised at the amount of shift work, or maybe I just was paying more attention. Either way, there are so many people who work into the night and overnight. Not to say crimes don't happen during the day, because we have seen a rise in crime, period, here. But this bill would allow people to make the decision for themselves based on their circumstances. Another email. Dear Senator Holcroft, as your constituent, I am reaching out to express my strong support for LB 77, the constitutional carry bill that was recently passed by the legislature. As a law-abiding citizen, I believe it is crucial to have the right to carry a firearm for self-defense without having to navigate bureaucratic hurdles. LB 77 recognizes this fundamental right and ensures that Nebraskans have the ability to protect themselves and their loved ones without unnecessary government interference. With the passage of LB 77s, Nebraska will be one step closer to becoming the 26th constitutional carry state, joining more than half the states in the country that have recognized the critical right. I urge you to support this bill and help Nebraska claim its rightful place among the states that value the right to self-defense. And let me just read one more. Dear Senator Holcroft, the people of Nebraska watched with interest this week the actions of the unicameral. Move this down a little bit. We saw many of our elected officials being targeted and called out by a couple of far-right crazy white girls. We watched as they spewed their hate and anger, but you stood strong for us. We watched as they called out specific people that crossed them and even told you to never speak to them again. I would ask you to honor their request. We need to move forward without their hate. So let them revel in their own perception. This week was momentous with LB 77 last week and LB 626.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Holcroft. Senator McDonald, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I don't think it's the importance of Senator Brewer bringing this bill for the 7th year. I think that's what he was elected. All of us were elected to do. We bring legislation. I don't think that's that important. I think what's important is over the last 7 years, we talk about 40 hours on the floor, us having discussion, debate on this bill. It's all the discussions he's had with citizens and the groups that actually daily put their lives on the line. Those are our police officers, our sheriffs. They were not at a comfort level when this began 7 years ago. Senator Brewer could have gave up. Senator Brewer could have just said, well, I'll wait for new people to get elected. He didn't do any of those things. He said, I will work with you. How do we improve this legislation? And that's what we have here today. We finally have legislation that has been worked on for 7 years with the input of citizens, with the input of the law enforcement. And we finally, at least for me as a state senator, I've got to the point where I am supporting LB 77. Now, just recently, as of February 28th, we had from the Nebraska Sheriff's Association, I'm not going to read the whole letter, but we thank you for considering our concerns, and we believe that the Amendment 588 sufficiently addresses those concerns. The purpose of this letter is to inform you that the adoption of Amendment 588, the Nebraska Sheriff's Association supports the passage of LB 77. That's the work he did over the last 7 years to get this association and others and individuals on board, where 7 years ago they were not considering that. That's what I want to thank Senator Brewer for, is the time he put in, the people he listened to, agreed and disagreed with, but he listened to them and he did his job as a state senator. I'll yield the remainder of my time to Senator Brewer.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Senator Brewer, you have 2 minutes, 50 seconds.
All right. Thank you, Senator McDonald. Thank you, Mr. President. That was kind of a obstacle that I could not avoid, and that was the law enforcement needs. For a variety of reasons, I've told him my brother's a sheriff, so I get my ear bent pretty hard when I'm not making sure that what I do is supportive of law enforcement. And there's a lot of things that we've done here that I don't think have been very supportive of law enforcement. We passed a bill a couple of years ago that put a lot of requirements on law enforcement, and it worked well for the large departments. Unfortunately, what it did to the small departments is it put such a burden on them that the county went without anybody to police it for much of the time, because now in a department that may only have 3 people in it, One of them has constantly gone to Grand Island to go through different training that is maybe a fit in some places, but probably not needed in central and western Nebraska. So as we work through these issues with law enforcement, we made changes. And as we adjusted, we made more changes, and we finally got to that good place. But I was getting to the point where I didn't know if we could do both. If we could get to where 77 could give us constitutional carry in the true sense of the word, and still be able to help law enforcement do their job without putting an additional burden on them. And I think it was the amendment that we did earlier that changed some of the penalties.
1 minute.
Penalties if you're a multiple offense person, because there's a point where if you don't get it and you fail to notify law enforcement, you need to go to jail. And that's the thing that I think a lot of folks need to understand is we have folks that seem very concerned about changing laws and maybe not having a felony for some things, but yet are concerned about whether we have too many felons. You can't have it both ways. If you're someone who breaks the law and you hurt people, you need to go away to jail. And you need to go for a very long time in some cases. So we have weaved this thing, and we're finally at a good place. And I got to tell you, I'm tired. It's been a long fight. So I'm ready to get to a vote on this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Senator Lippincott, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, sir. The captain will yield to the colonel for his closing.
Senator Brewer, you have 4 minutes and 50 seconds.
Well, I'm sure somewhere in there I got a closing, but after what will be in a few minutes, 44 hours, I don't think there's a lot to say except to tell you that what we do in this body sometimes is trying to follow through with the will of the people and give them the rights that they have in the Constitution. And sometimes we go out of our way to twist those rights and keep people from having them. And I think this is a case of that. LB 77, I've told you, sometimes can be as simple as a coat bill. We have open carry as the law in Nebraska. Putting on a coat makes you a criminal. Now, obviously, the preemption stuff is a part of that too. But quite frankly, I don't care. I don't think you should be part of a gun registration. You have rights, and I don't believe that the ability of cities to put you on a registry and dictate whether or not you can have a weapon or have accountability through their systems for what you have is wrong. Constitutional carry is giving back those rights. It is something that we need to do. I don't want to do this fight again. I meant what I said a moment ago. I am tired. It has been a long haul. But I think if you do your job, if you represent the people, you got to have these long fights. My hat's off to Anna Wishart. She has fought the good fight on medical marijuana. And how she keeps her spirit through some of that, I don't know. Because she has found barriers and she's went around them and went through other ways. And she's just got this spirit that, I got to see climbing Kilimanjaro with her. And so, we all have certain causes, certain things that we feel we owe the people of Nebraska. And in my case, it's constitutional carry. So what I would ask is a red vote on to recommit and your green vote on LB 77. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Mr. Clerk, you have a motion on the desk.
Mr. President, Senator Brewer would move to invoke cloture pursuant to Rule 7, Section 10 on LB 77.
All unexcused members are present. There's Senator Brewer, for what purpose do you rise?
Well, I would ask members to check in, and once we have folks checked in, do a roll call vote in regular order.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. All members are present. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Aguilar. Voting yes. Senator Albright. Voting yes. Senator Arch. Voting yes. Senator Armendariz. Voting yes. Senator Ballard. Voting yes. Senator Blood. Voting no. Senator Boston. Voting yes. Senator Bostar. Voting no. Excuse me, Senator. Senator Bostelman. Voting yes. Senator Brandt. Voting yes. Senator Brewer. Voting yes. Senator Breezy. Voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting no. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Voting no. Senator Clements. Voting yes. Senator Conrad. Voting no. Senator Day. Voting no. Senator DeBoer. Voting no. Senator DeKay. Voting yes. Senator Dorn. Voting yes. Senator Dover. Voting yes. Senator Dungan. Voting no. Senator Erdman. Voting yes. Senator Frederickson. Voting no. Senator Holleran. Voting yes. Senator Hansen. Voting yes. Senator Hardin. Voting yes. Senator Holcroft. Voting yes. Senator Hughes. Voting yes. Senator Hunt. Voting no. Senator Ibach. Voting yes. Senator Jacobson. Voting yes. Senator Kauth. Voting yes. Senator Linehan. Voting yes. Senator Lippincott. Voting yes. Senator Lowe. Voting yes. Senator McDonald. Voting yes. Senator McKinney. Senator Mosier. Voting yes. Senator Merman. Voting yes. Senator Raybold. Voting no. Senator Reapy. Voting yes. Senator Sanders. Voting yes. Senator Slama. Voting yes. Senator Vargas. Voting no. Senator Von Gillern. Voting yes. Senator Walls. Voting no. Senator Wayne. Senator Wishart. Voting no. Vote is 33 ayes, 14 nays, Mr. President, to invoke cloture.
Cloture is invoked. The first vote will be on the motion to recommit. Senators, all those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. There's been a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar. Voting no. Senator Albright. Voting no. Senator Arch. Voting no. Senator Armendariz. Voting no. Senator Ballard. Voting no. Senator Blood. Voting no. Senator Boston. Voting no. Senator Bostar. Not voting. Senator Bostelman. Voting no. Senator Brandt. Voting no. Senator Brewer. Voting no. Senator Breezy. Voting no. Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting yes. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Voting yes. Senator Clements. Voting no. Senator Conrad. Voting no. Senator Day. Voting yes. Senator DeBoer. Voting no. Senator DeKay. Voting no. Senator Dorn. Voting no. Senator Dover. Voting no. Senator Dungan. Voting no. Senator Erdman. Voting no. Senator Frederickson. Not voting. Senator Holleran. Voting no. Senator Hansen. Voting no. Senator Hardin. Voting no. Senator Holcroft. Voting no. Senator Hughes. Voting no. Senator Hunt. Voting yes. Senator Ibach. Voting no. Senator Jacobson. Voting no. Senator Kauth. Voting no. Senator Linehan. Voting no. Senator Lippincott. Voting no. Senator Lowe. Voting no. Senator McDonald. Voting no. Senator McKinney. Senator Mosier. Voting no. Senator Merman. Voting no. Senator Raybold. Voting yes. Senator Reapy. Voting no. Senator Sanders. Voting no. Senator Slama. Voting no. Senator Vargas. Voting no. Senator Von Gillern. Voting no. Senator Walls. Voting no. Senator Wayne. Senator Wishart. Voting no. Vote is 5 ayes, 40 nays, Mr. President, to recommit the bill.
The motion fails. Mr. Clerk, the next vote is to dispense with the at-large reading. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
42 ayes, 1 nay, dispense with the at-large reading.
The at-large reading is dispensed with. Mr. Clerk, please read the title.
Engrossed Legislative Bill 77, introduced by Brewer, 43, Aguilar, 35, Albright, 17, Ballard, 21, Bostelman, 23, Brandt, 32, Breezy, 41, Clements, 2, DeKay, 40, Dorn, 30, Dover, 19, Erdman, 47, Hunter, 33, Ben Hansen, 16, Hardin 48, Holcroft 36, Hughes 24, Ibach 44, Jacobson 42, Linehan 39, Lippincott 34, Lowe 37, Moser 32, Merman 38, Sanders 41, Sanders 45, Slama 1. A bill for inoculating firearms, amend sections 14-102, 15-255, 16-227, 17-556, 18-1703, 28-1201, 1205, 69-2429, 2435, 2439, 40, 41, 42, 43, and 45. Reach revised statute Nebraska section 28, 101, 1201, 1202, 1351, 1354, and 69, 24, 36. Revised statute cumulative supplement 2022. Prohibited regulations of weapons by cities and villages, counties, provide for the carrying of concealed handgun without a permit. Change provisions relating to concealed weapons, provide for requirements, limits, and offenses relating to the carry of concealed handgun, provide for an affirmative defense, creates the offense of carrying a firearm, destructive device during the commission of dangerous misdemeanor. Change provisions relating to the Concealed Handgun Permit Act. Harmonized provisions, change provides and eliminates definitions. Harmonized provisions repeals the original section.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. All provisions of law relative to proceeding have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 77 pass? All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Request for a roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar, voting yes. Senator Albright, voting yes. Senator Arch, voting yes. Senator Armendariz, voting yes. Senator Ballard, voting yes. Senator Blood, voting no. Senator Boston, voting yes. Senator Bostar, voting no. Senator Bostelman, voting yes. Senator Brandt, voting yes. Senator Brewer, voting yes. Senator Breezy, voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh, voting no. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, voting no. Senator Clements, voting yes. Senator Conrad, voting no. Senator Day, voting no. Senator DeBoer, voting no. Senator DeKay, voting yes. Senator Dorn, voting yes. Senator Dover, voting yes. Senator Dungan, voting no. Senator Erdman, voting yes. Senator Frederickson, voting no. Senator Holleran, voting yes. Senator Hansen, voting yes. Senator Hardin, voting yes. Senator Holcroft, voting yes. Senator Hughes, voting yes. Senator Hunt, voting no. Senator Ibach, voting yes. Senator Jacobson, voting yes. Senator Kauth, voting yes. Senator Linehan, voting yes. Senator Lippincott, voting yes. Senator Lowe, voting yes. Senator McDonald, voting yes. Senator McKinney, Senator Mosier, voting yes. Senator Merman, voting yes. Senator Raybold, voting no. Senator Reapy, voting yes. Senator Sanders, voting yes. Senator Slama, voting yes. Senator Vargas, voting no. Senator Von Gillern, voting yes. Senator Walls, voting no. Senator Wayne, Senator Wishart, voting no.
Record, Mr. Clerk.
Voting aye, Senators Aguilar, Albright, Arch, Armendariz, Ballard, Boston, Bostelman, Brandt, Brewer, Breezy, Clemens, DeKay, Dorn, Dover, Erdman, Holleran, Hansen, Hardin, Holcroft, Hughes, Ibach, Jacobson, Kauth, Linehan, Lippincott, Lowe, McDonald, Mosier, Merman, Reapy, Sanders, Slama, Von Gillern. Voting no, Senators Blood, Bostar, John Kavanaugh, Michaela Kavanaugh, Conrad Day, DeBoer, Dungan, Frederickson, Hunt, Raybold, Vargas, Walls, Wishart, McKinney. Voting, not voting, Senators McKinney and Wayne. Votes 33 ayes, 14 nays, 2 excused not voting, Mr. President.
LB 77 passes. While the legislature is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose to sign and do hereby sign LB 77. Could you please clear the balcony, security? Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President, single item, Senator Sanders introduced Legislative Bill 583A. It's a bill for enacting and appropriations, appropriates funds to aid in the carrying out of the provisions of Legislative Bill 583. Mr. President, returning to the agenda, Legislative Bill 191, general file. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh would move to to indefinitely postpone Legislative Bill 191 pursuant to Rule 6, Section 3.
Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to open.
Actually, I believe that the introducer gets to open first.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Halloran, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning again, colleagues, Nebraska. LB 191 was a Business and Labor Committee priority bill that I sponsored, and I have sacrificed that bill to become a shell bill. So instead of shell bill, I'm going to call it a surrogate bill. Don't want to have people ask questions about that, but it's basically a surrogate bill. I do want to thank Chairman Reapy and his staff, and of course all the committee for all the hard work they've done. There are several bills that we are combining under LB 191, but just to be clear, LB 191 in its original form does not exist. It's hosting surrogate to a number of good bills. So with that, I'll yield the balance of my time to Senator Reapy.
Senator Reapy, you have 8 minutes, 58 seconds.
Thank you, Senator Halloran, and thank you, Mr. President. LB 199, as Senator Halloran said, is the Business and Labor Committee priority bill, and with AM 1330 contains closely related consent agenda type bills that address issues of business and labor throughout the state. AM 1330 includes striking provisions of LB 191 in its entirety, so it becomes a shell bill, and also includes provisions of LB 267, LB 460, LB 639, LB 671, LB 666, LB 427, and amended provisions of LB 249. I will touch briefly on each bill contained within the amendment, but will defer to the original introducers to better inform the body of the details of each bill. The first bill I will address is LB 267, which was introduced by Senator Brewer, and it provides for the prioritization of resources for the protection of critical infrastructure utility workers during any civil defense emergency. It provides priority access to personal protective equipment, medical screening, testing, preventive health services, medical treatment, and the administration of vaccines in the event of an emergency involving a severe threat to human health. The second bill, LB 460, was introduced by Senator McDonald, who relates to the mental health injuries or mental illness of Nebraska's first responders pursuant to the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Act. LB 460 provides for reimbursement by the Department of Health and Human Services for the cost of mental health examinations and resilience training in the event of not reimbursement by the first responders' employers. LB 639 was introduced by Senator Blood, and this bill amends provisions of Nebraska Workers' Compensation Act relating to rules and regulations, case progression standards, and summons and eliminates requirements to distribute copies of certain materials. LB 671 was introduced by Senator Hansen, and it amends the state of Nebraska's training and support cash fund to be used for the retention of existing employees of the Nebraska businesses. LB 666, a bill I introduced, changes provisions in the employment security law, allowing employers the ability to choose a preferred method of document delivery and extending the deadline for employees to submit voluntary contributions to the Nebraska Department of Labor from January 10th to February 28th. LB 427, another bill which I introduced, standardizes the fee for in-state and out-of-state contractors and eliminates the additional fee for each additional project assessed against out-of-state contractors under the Contractor Registration Act, and I will speak on that more in a bit. LB 249, as amended by AM 400, introduced by Senator Breezy, makes several changes to the Rural Workforce Housing Investment Act. Finally, after debate has ceased for AM 1330, I will discuss an amendment to the committee amendment consisting of Section 8 of LB 818, which amends Nebraska Revised Statute Section 48-145 by providing certain assessments made on self-insured employers currently directed to the general fund instead of being placed in, and they will be placed in the compensation court cash fund. We consider these amendments to be friendly, and with that, I urge your green vote on LB 191 and the previously mentioned amendments so as they come up. Thank you again, Senator Halloran, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Reapy. Senator Kavanaugh, you're recognized to open on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. Senator Reapy, I'm only going to comment on this once. I'm sure it was purely accidental, but I did notice that the bill number that is numbered 666 does belong to you. And just wanted to just note that for the record this morning. Thank you, Senator Reapy, for your introduction, and Senator Halloran for your introduction. I tried to write down all the bill numbers. I hope I got them all written down correctly. But I was going to go through, we'll just start by going through what's in this bill. So once again, I rely very heavily on our committee statements. So thank you to the Business and Labor Committee staff for putting together committee statements. And thank you to my staff for putting together what they put together on committee statements. So let's just start with LB 460, because that's the one I have here in my book. And that one belongs to Senator Mike McDonald, and it is Legislative Bill 460 relating to mental health injuries for mental illnesses for Nebraska's first responders pursuant to the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Act, provides for reimbursement by the Department of Health and Human Services for the cost of mental health examinations and resilience training to the extent not reimbursed by first responders' employer. Further, the reimbursement rate for mental health examinations would be established by the Critical Incident Stress Management Program, whose lead agency is the Department of Health and Human Services. Presently, only rates are set for resilience training. Thank you to Senator McDonald for bringing this bill. So I'm just looking at the fiscal note for LB 460. And so the first part of our fiscal notes are always from our fiscal office, the legislative fiscal office. And then the other additional information would be from any other entities that government entities that have a fiscal impact. So there is a additional fiscal note from the Department of Health and Human Services, and I think that is it. So the fiscal note from our fiscal office, LB 460 modifies language to allow for the reimbursement of mental health examinations and both initial and annual resiliency training. The Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS, indicates through its fiscal note response that it would fulfill implementation requirements using existing staff. The Critical Incident Stress Management Program, CISM Health Program Manager, will perform a list of tasks as described in the agency's fiscal note. The Office of Emergency Health Systems, OEHS, administrative specialists will enter approved applications for payment to DHHS financial systems. DHHS explains that it will absorb these requirements with existing staffing and believes that existing appropriations in Program 33 are sufficient to absorb the costs for reimbursement. No fiscal impact. There we go. LB 460 modifies language to allow, this is the department's fiscal note, to allow for the reimbursement of mental health examinations in both initial and annual resiliency training. If LB 460 is passed, the Department of Health and Human Services would fulfill implementation requirements using existing staff. The Critical Incident Stress Management Program, CISM Health Program Manager, will perform a review of all reimbursement policies, amounts, annual limits, requirements of training materials, and updated documents to the DHHS website. The additional mental health examination will need to be added to all previously mentioned items. This is anticipated to take approximately 65 hours. The CISM Health Program Manager will review all applications for reimbursements received and approve them for payment. This is an estimated 3 hours per week, 156 hours per year, depending on volume. The Office of Emergency Health Systems, OEHS, administrative specialists will be entering approved applications for payment to DHHS financial systems. This is estimated 3 to 4 hours per week, 156 hours per year, depending on volume. The department will absorb these requirements within existing staffing. This bill does not appropriate additional funding to DHHS for the reimbursement. The department believes existing appropriations for CISM are sufficient to absorb these costs. That's good. Okay, this is the online comment for LB 460. Dear honored members of the Business and Labor Committee, I submit to you that I stand in support of LB 460. I am almost 63 years old, and of those 34 years have been occupied with public service and emergency services as a first responder. I should say this is John Bishop from District 47, Bayard, Nebraska. I had already gained a college degree in theology from Oral Roberts University and was a pastor before beginning my career journey in emergency services. I have never regretted my decision to follow my career path from enhanced 911 operator to emergency medical technician to paramedic to EMS instructor. I have during that time involved myself in voluntary service as a police EMS fire chaplain for over 25 years and as a paramedic 10 years on one of the nation's busiest trauma centers. I estimate that I have responded to 35,000 911 calls as an EMS professional, not counting call outs as a chaplain to crisis emergencies. Along the way, I have witnessed injury and death to my fellow first responders. Many very valuable and needed first responders I have known have been injured mentally and have taken their life. There is nothing so sad as to attend the funeral of a colleague who you had the highest respect, who decided the pain, mental trauma, or depression from cumulative bad calls was too much to bear and ended their life. Both the first responder and the community at large invest thousands and thousands of dollars into the education, employment, and equipping these heroes for everyday duties. Sadly, until recently, despite statistics, it was not acknowledged that preventative measures must be taken to help prevent mental health injury and even death in these highly trained individuals who a great amount of funds were invested. This is not the main reason I am writing this to you today. I support this measure because of the survivors. Heroes those you don't see on the television or newspaper, the spouses and children of the injured and dead first responder. They pay for years after the injury or death of their loved one. I have been the chaplain that had to tell them that their daddy or mommy had gone away forever. You never forget the words you say at the funeral homes and graveside services for such tragedies. I'm going to stop for a minute. I'm sorry. It's just very rambunctious in here while I am reading about a chaplain delivering the news that a loved one has died. So, I have a picture of a fellow female paramedic in my office. She was a great paramedic, college paramedic student, preceptor of the year in 2020. She took her life in 2021. I have that picture to remind me that no one is immune. Many a silent tear has cursed my face, grieving the loss of her.
1 minute.
Thank you. Everyone was shocked. She seemed so strong and tough. I think that's an important place to stop. She seems so strong and tough. We never know what struggles other people are going through, whether they're in this chamber or in this gallery. And sometimes it's just important to remember, to pause and remember that we don't know what's happening in a person's life if they don't let us know it. And they might be struggling and hurting in ways that you will never know. So just try to have kindness and compassion as much as you can. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Blood, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to speak on LB 639, and later after the next amendment, I will speak on LB 818. I want to thank personally Senator Halloran for allowing us to use 191 as the shell bill as our vehicle to move a lot of great bills forward. And thanks to Senator Rupie and his staff for putting this together. LB 639 is on behalf of the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Court. And simply what it does is there's several sections of statute that we are changing. The first part is to eliminate the requirement that the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Court shall receive 2 hard copies of the session laws. The next part is to extend the summons return date in cases filed in the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Court from 7 days after the date of issue to 14 days after the date of issue. The next change is to reduce the time for notice of public hearings from 30 days to 14 days. The next section is to eliminate the requirement that a trial should be held within 60 days from the date of the filing of a petition. This deadline is left over from the previous review panel system, given current needs for litigants to engage in the discovery process, and it is no longer workable. And the reason that we are asking for these is that dates have been released for the court later and later each year need more time. And so what we're trying to do is really make the Workers' Compensation Court more efficient and more fair. And what they had before doesn't provide sufficient time, even with the 7 days postal time. And frankly, no longer hard copies are needed for the legislative journal. So we know that these things are getting worse over time, and I really commend the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Court for bringing these issues forward. We'll have more to say on it when LB 818 comes up on the Second Amendment. But in a nutshell, that was what LB 639 does. It is basically tightening up state statute to make it so it works better for everybody participating in the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Court. With that, I would yield any time I have left to Senator Day.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Day, that's 2 minutes, 33 seconds. And she waves. Senator Hunt, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I have some questions about LB 267, which is encompassed in part of this bill now with the committee amendment attached, but I'm not going to ask them on this round of debate. I'm going to wait until select or maybe final because I want to see if anybody else sees what I see. And I don't want to mess the bill up. With that, I'd yield any time I have to Senator Michaela Cavanaugh.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, that's 4 minutes, 24 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Hunt. The next letter in support of LB 460 is from Sue Martin with the Nebraska AFL-CIO. The Nebraska State AFL-CIO is submitting this letter in support of LB 460 to provide for reimbursement of mental health examinations and resilience training for certain persons under the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Act. Nebraska has taken great strides over the past few years, recognizing that first responders' jobs are stressful and dangerous, all while serving the public and protecting our communities. Unless you are a first responder or put into that situation, you will never know the trauma that they have subjected themselves to every day on the job. We are grateful to our legislature that our legislature has passed legislation to help these individuals deal with mental illness and post-traumatic stress. The current legislation already allows the reimbursement of resilience training, but the bill as introduced will reimburse a first responder's employer for mental health examinations, which we see as an investment in a healthy workforce. This is a benefit to both the employer and the employee. As employers build and improve workplace culture and resilience, they also seek ways to address workplace stress and mental health. When addressed, employers build a resilient workforce, employees handle work stress better, and develop protective factors against stress. We support LB 460, and thank you, Senator McDonald, for introducing this bill, as it will truly support and recognize first responders and other workers who undergo daily stress and trauma. just by coming to work. The next letter in support of LB 460 is from Keith McWilliams from Syracuse, Nebraska, District 1. I am a volunteer, current officer of Syracuse Volunteer Fire Department. My people spend countless hours away from their families and often missing family functions, also leaving work unpaid to protect our citizens. I believe that our state should help every department to help recruit and retain volunteers when we respond to fatalities. Many times we can carry that scene with us for many years. Mental counseling is always unaffordable. I think there's a typo in this. Unaffordable for small communities and fire districts. I believe this would be a great help to retaining members. Monica Meyer from Omaha, representing the Nebraska Chapter National Association of Social Workers, Chairperson Reapy, and members of the Business and Labor Committee, the Nebraska Chapter of the National Association of Social Workers, NASW-NE, would like to go on record in support of LB 460, which seeks to provide for reimbursement of mental health examinations and resilience training.
1 minute.
Thank you. For certain persons under the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Act. Similar to our support of this session's LB 792, we recognize the need for mental health services in our communities. Trauma is everywhere, and its impact on people has ripple effects into the different areas of their lives, particularly for first responders. The ability to access mental health examinations is crucial in the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a common affliction in first responders. The nature of their job and the situations they must respond to result in symptoms of PTSD that can impact their daily function. To remove the barrier of cost, adoption of this law would allow them to get the treatment they need to be able to continue to serve our communities. The benefit of resilience training is a preventative measure that will help ensure—
That's your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Blood has guests in the north balcony. Fourth graders from Rumsey Station Elementary and Papillion, please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature. Senator Ibach, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Senator Breezy for bringing LB 249 and Chairman Reapy and my fellow members of the Business and Labor Committee for incorporating this bill into this committee package. As a representative for LD 44, one of the biggest issues that has been brought to my attention is the lack of workforce housing in the district, and this is a large issue for all of Nebraska. During the committee hearing on January 30th, the Business and Labor Committee heard from communities around the state in support of expanding this program. For instance, the Neighborhood Works Northeast Nebraska, a regional nonprofit housing development organization in Northeast Nebraska who manages the funds for the Columbus and Schuyler program, have used this program to build approximately 300 housing units in their area. The committee also heard from the chair of Grow Grand Island. They provided recent examples of individuals who wanted to move to Grand Island, but were unable to do so due to the lack of workforce housing in that city. They testified that Grand Island, like all communities growing, they need two things. They need housing and they need workforce. By enacting LB 249, we will be able to double the program's capacity to allow high-capacity developers to accelerate production of workforce housing, to hasten completion of workforce housing developments, and to eliminate barriers to financing that these projects require. To quote the movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come, and we believe that in District 44. After seeing the impact that the Rural Workforce Housing Program has had on this state, I was honored to prioritize this legislation. As I stated earlier, we need to increase this program to expand the availability of workforce housing in all communities in Nebraska. If we build it, they will come. I urge you to support LB 249 by adopting AM 1330 to LB 191 and for your green vote on the underlying bill. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield my time back.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bills read this morning were presented to the governor at 11:35 a.m. Amendment to be printed, Senator Frederickson to LB 524, Senator McDonald to LB 648, new LR 102 from Senator Clements in Boston. That'll be laid over. Finally, Mr. President, a priority motion. Senator Walls moved to recess the body until 1:00 p.m.
You've heard the motion to adjourn, recess. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, say nay. We are recessed.